Why motion was never as simple as it looked. For most of history, motion felt honest. You pushed, it moved. You stopped, it obeyed. But that simplicity was an illusion, one that shaped how humanity understood reality for centuries. Motion seemed direct, intuitive, and absolute. If something moved, there had to be a cause. If it stopped, that cause must have ended. This logic felt undeniable because it matched everyday experience. Yet the universe was quietly playing by different rules. To understand why motion was never simple, we have to step back to a time when explanation mattered more than precision. Early physics was built to describe the visible world, not the invisible forces shaping it. People trusted what they could see and feel, and what they felt was resistance, weight, friction, fatigue. Motion always came with effort, so effort became the explanation. This assumption worked until measurements became more precise. As tools improved, patterns emerged that intuition could not explain. Objects moved differently depending on their environment. The same force produced different outcomes. And some motions seemed to continue even when no force was applied. These were not dramatic failures. They were quiet inconsistencies, easy to dismiss, but impossible to erase. The first cracks appeared in controlled experiments. When surfaces became smoother, motion lasted longer. When resistance decreased, objects behaved less like common sense expected. It suggested that something was interfering with motion, not sustaining it. That stopping required explanation just as much as moving. This realization unsettled a deeply held belief that the universe naturally preferred rest. That motion was temporary and unnatural. Because if motion persisted without effort, then rest was not the default. Stability was not guaranteed, and the universe was far less obedient than it appeared. What looked like simplicity was actually complexity hidden by limitations. And once those limits were lifted, motion began to reveal its true nature, not as a behavior imposed on matter, but as a fundamental feature woven into reality itself. As this idea took hold, it forced a reconsideration of force itself. If motion could continue without effort, then force was no longer the engine of movement. It became the agent of change. Force did not create motion. It altered it. It bent trajectories, shifted speeds, and redirected paths that already existed. This distinction was subtle but transformative. It separated motion from cause. Objects were no longer waiting for instructions to move. They were already in motion, already obeying deeper rules. What we perceived as cause and effect was often just interference layered on top of something more fundamental. This created tension with another belief that had gone unchallenged for centuries, that heavier objects naturally moved differently than lighter ones. Experience seemed to confirm it. Heavy things were harder to push. They felt slower. But when friction and resistance were stripped away, that difference vanished. Mass resisted change, not motion itself. The universe, once again, refused to match expectation. Weight did not decide how things moved through space. It decided how stubbornly they resisted being redirected. Motion itself remained impartial. As experiments grew more refined, motion began to look less like a simple story and more like a balance of competing influences. Remove interference, and motion revealed a quiet persistence. Add resistance, and it decayed. What felt like natural behavior was often just the result of hidden forces quietly shaping outcomes. This realization widened the gap between intuition and reality. Everyday experience became unreliable. The world we evolved to navigate was masking deeper laws that only appeared under careful observation. And once those laws were seen, they could not be unseen. Motion was no longer a surface-level phenomenon. It was a window into the structure of the universe. A clue that beneath complexity lay a set of rules both simpler and more unsettling than anyone expected. The conflict sharpened when these ideas were pushed beyond Earth. Motion behaved differently when gravity weakened, when resistance vanished, when objects were freed from familiar constraints. In space, intuition collapsed completely. A gentle push sent objects drifting endlessly. A small correction carried enormous consequences. There was no natural slowing, no invisible hand guiding things back to rest. This forced a painful admission. Much of what felt like fundamental truth was local convenience. Our understanding of motion was shaped by air, friction, and gravity. Remove those, and the universe revealed a different character, one that did not prioritize comfort or simplicity. As motion became better understood, it exposed an even deeper paradox. If force only changed motion, then what caused the universe to move in the first place? There was no longer a clear starting push. Motion did not need an origin story. It simply existed, governed by constraints rather than commands. This idea challenged philosophical assumptions as much as scientific ones. It suggested a universe without preference, without intention, a universe that did not care whether motion made sense to human minds. Laws replaced purposes, patterns replaced plans. The build-up toward this realization was not dramatic. There was no single experiment that shattered belief. It was an accumulation of evidence, each piece eroding certainty. Measurements lined up, predictions held. Reality quietly agreed with the new model. Yet emotionally, the shift was enormous. Motion stopped being something we controlled. It became something we participated in. Every movement was part of a larger web, influenced by countless factors beyond perception. Nothing moved alone. Nothing moved simply. By the time this understanding settled, the universe felt larger, colder, and more precise. The comfort of intuition was gone. In its place stood a reality governed by rules that cared only about consistency, not expectation. And motion was the clearest sign of that indifference. The climax of this realization is quiet, but permanent. Motion was never simple because the universe was never designed to match intuition. What felt obvious was only familiar, and familiarity turned out to be a poor guide to truth. Once motion was understood as persistence rather than effort, the universe snapped into focus. Forces became influences, not drivers. Rest became a condition created by interference, not a natural destination. Stability became something constructed, not assumed. This reframed everything from engineering to exploration. Machines were redesigned to manage change, not fight motion. Space travel became possible because motion no longer needed constant correction. Even at the smallest scales, particles followed the same stubborn rules, indifferent to human expectations. More importantly, it changed how we see ourselves. We are not movers in a still world. We are patterns inside a moving one. Our bodies, our planet, our galaxy are all in motion, layered on motion, guided by rules that never pause. The universe does not ask permission before it moves. It does not slow down to be understood. It simply continues, consistent and uncaring, whether we notice or not. What once felt chaotic became elegant. What once felt confusing became inevitable. Motion was never simple because reality was never built for comfort. It was built for consistency. And once it is understood, the universe stops feeling broken. It starts feeling honest. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.